day 2 of hearing stream 2 into centres, residential and open space zones. Purpose of this final session is to hear from the officers in terms of the variety of questions that we've posed to them over the last 2 days, and also the directions we've made for further engagement between the officers and certain submitters. So I understand we're in Miss Wheatley's hand to take us through those questions in a reasonably quick manner and to discuss timeframes and directions.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So here up on the screen, I have the matters that have been raised during the course of hearing stream 2. As you say, I'll try to be brief. So initially, we've got general residential zone responding to Ms. Zollner's evidence for Greater Wellington Regional Council, questioning the legal basis for the interpretation of give effect to or have regard to in the RMA. Further questions regarding Greater Wellington's involvement as a submitter in the South Wairarapa Spatial Plan or Carterton East Structure Plan. Number 2, provide a map showing the location and extent of historic heritage precincts and overlap with the low density precinct. Standard S13, further consideration of the evidence from Enviro New Zealand services, particularly that curbside requirement, and discuss that with Ms.
Further clarification during the submitter's presentation on that might have led to a reinterpretation of clause 3. Yes.
Yes. Oh, and liaising with Ms. Rossa on that. GRZ S9, which will apply across all zones. Deletion of drinking from the title of the standard. Does that have any unintended consequences? And check the appropriateness of the recommended amendments with Council's development engineers with regard to the firefighting and water supply capacity.
That's taken on I don't know if you managed to capture it, but that's taken on a wider significance now in light of presentation from emergency service. Have you captured that later on?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good.
Hamish has been a very helpful note taker.
But maybe just annotate that to where there's a wider issue now in relation to consequence of including that standard of permitted activity regime for all zones that it relates to. There's also that wider question of building adverse district plan, which Mr. McKims gave his answer to. Thank you.
Perfect. Alrighty. These ones in bold matters that we've discussed that we might provide some additional information or clarification just to assist the panel. So responding to Greater Wellington, whether any further evaluation and recommendation on the low and medium density precincts.
Yes.
Conference with Kiwi Rail on the height in relation to boundary standard being an efficient approach to manage the rail corridor interface.
Yes, I think that's largely yourself and Skipple's way.
In response to Xavier Warren, any further evaluation recommendation on removing minimum lot sizes or reducing them?
Yes.
Liaise with Mr. Wendon on the residential design guides, just clarifying those matters that he wants to refine.
Yes, I think the two-step process, and if he can indicate the sort of areas, and then if you could share that with me, and I whether they matters that discussion or whether they go beyond his submission.
Sure. But we can do that. Responding to Martinborough Community Board, any further evaluation on alternative wastewater systems in Martinborough? And
there's an action on them also, isn't it? That's the resolution. Yes.
Yeah.
The question there, and the one that I put to Ms. Crow,
yeah,
Crow, was, does the rule in the matter of discretion adequately deal with alternative wastewater systems on site?
Relation to Somerset, any further evaluation or recommendation on precinct 3, but I think we're in agreement on all of that, which is great. Hearing from Hinade Manaina, any further evaluation or recommendation on infill subdivision and development with regard to notification?
Yes, it was particularly in regard to notification.
Yeah. Responding to EnviroNZ services again, any further evaluation on site waste storage requirements?
Yes.
And yeah, bias with her. Onto settlement zone, explain about Pirinoa and Kahutara and why they're not zone settlement, noting there are no submissions, so potentially out of scope, but we'll provide the clarification, absolutely.
And I just, on that one, can you also tell us what, if any, discussion of those two sites that were in the section 32?
Yes.
Maybe that there was none, but that's valid to know that.
Cool. Clarifying the recommendation for supportive residential care activity and residential activity, any potential consequential amendments and integration with the general residential zone on those matters. Onto the centre zone, a table listing the relevant policies, rules, standards relating to centres design guide and how they come into effect.
Thank you.
Conference with Greater Wellington on the wording of TCZ policy P3.
Is that in relation?
That was in relation. What do you want to jump in?
If I can remember, it was TCZ P3F, which was
yes,
relating to
residential density in the town centre.
and compatibility. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Responding to Harvey Norman properties, any further evaluation on the zoning of that site, noting it'll be considered as part of hearing 13.
Yes, it will be. And I doubt that we'll hear back from Harvey Norman on that. So this is every shot at that. We have some discussion on how the neighbourhood centre zoning was determined to apply to that site in light of the fact that the town centre zone would better encapsulate what's on the ground in terms of current activities. But were there other factors such as the size of the remaining zone that made the town centre zone inappropriate in a spatial distribution sense?
Question, and it's just my mind. The Copthorne Solway, is that part of the neighbourhood?
That's the neighbouring one.
That's zoned residential.
That's zone residential.
Yes.
Okay.
And relatively covered under existing use rights and consents, I imagine.
Okay. Thank you.
Then you've got another hotel motel beside that, and then another one beside that. Then you're into the light industrial area.
All of which is zoned residential, and across the road is
so
Mixed use.
it's a real
Got some
mixed use.
It's just that,
pockets of mixed use and then residential.
Yeah.
The Harvey Norman's in with the Caltex there, that site.
yeah.
Mr.
Okay,
Tracy
thank you.
raised two issues. One was re-subdivision of tenancies, and then expansion. And if you could comment on both of those scenarios, and it was, I think,
what was that he was asking? Was that if
there was some internal subdivision of the tenancies, we felt that would trigger the need for a fully discretionary activity because that's where those tenancies exceeded 100 square metres. So I want to understand whether that is your interpretation.
So basically, would that render the certificate of compliance ineffective?
Yeah, yes, that's, well, first of all, is he right in his plain interpretation of the rule? And secondly, does the certificate of compliance obviate that in any way? does it override the plain interpretation of the rules? Can he rely on the certificate of compliance? And then the second one was expansion. Any expansion that would involve tenancies greater than 100 square metres, it would also require a fully discretionary activity.
So interpretation being correct, yeah. Moving on to open space zones then. Question about whether any submitters oppose the overall change in approach from the operative plan zoning spaces, rural and residential, to the proposed district plan, introducing 3 open space zones. History of the Wairarapa College farm block being zoned open space. Rural R9 in the natural open space zone for camping ground. Any unintended consequences, adding reference to Department of Conservation, such as requirements for self-contained vehicles. Any other legislation or regulations managing that matter. And in response to Transpower, any further evaluation or recommendation on policy recognition for National Grid and open space zone?
Probably not. Yep.
Yeah, it seemed fairly agreeable. Next on to future urban zone. I think this one's got a few explaining the approach to future urban areas in the operative plan. Provide table and map of future urban zone areas in the proposed plan, where they're new or rolled over from the operative district plan.
As FDAs, yeah.
Include zoning status and the proposed district plan for all future development areas.
From the operative.
So that's yeah. So I'm assuming that means where FDAs have now become general residential, whether they've been rolled over to future urban zone. Yeah. Acknowledging the recommendation not to introduce a new objective into the future urban zone on reverse sensitivity. Any further consideration in response to Horticulture New Zealand, particularly given her clarification that it relates to new residential activities within the future urban zone and potentially setback distances.
As a permitted activity.
Yeah.
Particularly the one lot per, 1 unit per lot.
Within the buzz.
Will that involve some discussion with Ms. Levinson?
Yes, I'll just check. Yes, we've got that in the highlight just a bit further down. Any submissions opposing the spatial extent of the fuzz? Sorry, I'm just going to say fuzz now. How many properties and owners of each fuzz are they in the proposed, are the fuzz areas in the proposed plan contained in the Wellington Region FDS? For fuzz areas in Greytown and Martinborough, provide a map showing the location and extent of the low hazard flood area.
Yes.
Also check and confirm which data source was used, whether it's the community-led process for the plan information, the latest data. Is it likely or feasible that the Martinborough wastewater treatment plant issue is likely to be resolved within the lifetime of the plan?
And Greytown.
Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Martinborough.
Very similar issues.
Yeah. And Greytown.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as a point of clarification, are you wanting the Section 42A reporting officer to be answering all of these? Or are you wanting the reporting officer that did the summary statement specifically relating to the Greytown and Martinborough to be answering those specific questions?
I think that's for Mr. O'Leary. Agree? Yes.
Thank you.
And
You wipe your brow.
that's for Mr. O'Leary in his position as a planner. We're not wanting to hear an SWDC response.
Okay. Oh, yeah. And then next, Canoe Wines partnership site at 3 Robert Street. Would a site-specific rule with precondition restricting subdivision and development be appropriate, or is it already covered?
It's already covered.
Yeah.
Yes, it may be, but.
GRs and provisions. For the Papua Road properties we just heard from, are they currently connected to 3 waters infrastructures? If so, what? Total land area for those properties, and again, would subdivision of these properties be feasible under the current provisions?
You perhaps also, look at the site-specific rule for that as well, because the issues are very similar from what Mr. O'Leary said to us.
Could you also, for just the record, clarify the further submissions received on the Papua Road? What we've recorded is one from, is it Tumu Developments? Okay.
Cool. Question.
I guess, could you draw our attention as to how the submission was summarised?
The further submission or the original?
The original submission. Issue there is to make the panel to understand whether a member of the public having a look at that summary would reasonably understand what was being suggested.
Cool. Cool.
Could you also just remind the panel when you do that, the way in which that was conveyed, that summary of submissions and the opportunities was conveyed to the wider public?
We can do that. Anything else on that one before we?
No.
Cool. Relating to the Woodside area, identify the South Wairarapa spatial plan. Why isn't this a future urban zone? Is there scope in submissions to consider adding it? Touching back on the matter raised by Ms. Levinson for Horticulture New Zealand, what is the level of risk of reverse sensitivity effects arising under permitted activity rules in the future urban zone between residential and, in her example, horticulture? Depending on the risk, what additional provisions, if any, should be added to manage it?
What we're particularly interested in is any net change to the risk profile between the rural zoning and the FUZ zoning, or are they the same risk?
Righty. Moving on to the bolder ones, which is, as mentioned before, is kind of providing more context around things. Responding to Paul Bergen, any further evaluation or recommendation on rezoning of his property to future urban zone?
And just on that,
Yep.
I may have missed it somewhere, which is more than likely, as to why the future urban zone of Chamberlain Road was reduced.
From the draft to the proposed.
Yeah,
Yeah, in the draft.
just some clarification around that.
Yes. You may have come in after that happened, I think.
Yeah,
Craig, yes.
just,
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
just beyond me.
I can't remember either. It'd be really good to have, it's been 4 years, so it's,
Sure.
yeah.
Cool, I'll provide useful context. Responding to Canoe Wines, any further evaluation on the recommended of rezoning of 3 Robert Street, general res?
Yes. We're looking for a clear recommendation from the reporting officer on that.
So I'll add that to Papua as well.
In light of the evidence and questions from the panel over the last 2 days.
At 1.38, isn't it? So, Mr. O'Leary,
Yes.
as an expert planner.
Cool. Responding to Simon Bryn, any further valuation on?
Burn or burn?
Burn.
Right. Cool. Any further evaluation to rezone Chamberlain Road, future urban zone? Responding to Horticulture New Zealand, any further evaluation or recommendation on managing rural urban interface for the fuzz?
Yeah, we might have that one.
Isn't it the same? Isn't it the same?
Yeah, it is a little bit.
Earlier one.
Oh, that's all good. Just yoink that. Responding to Peter Clark, Wayne Carmichael, and Doreen McKenzie, we just heard from. Again, any further evaluation and clear recommendation in light of questions from the panel. And that touches on what you just asked before as well about notification of those other property owners.
Yes, it does. Yes, exactly.
Cool. For general industrial zone, does the criteria in R6 be or and, just to make sure that they're all inclusive? Just checking that's correct. Respond to Enviro NZ, any other recommendations about the policy and activity status for residential activities in industrial zone? Enviro New Zealand to supply wording for the matters of discretion, and they've queried deferring organic composting definition to the rule.
That captures capture the floor area matter.
I will consideration of GFA limit. Responding to Transpower, any other changes needed to general industrial zone policy recognition, but again, that seemed to be relatively in agreement. And these last couple of matters for all zones. Summary table listing recommended setbacks for each zone. If rail corridor setbacks are added, should there be consistency? If not, why not? Responding to New Zealand heavy haulage, any further things to add? Same for Mr. Garstang, any further things to add on protecting rivers?
Mr. Garstang is be considered at a future stream.
Yes.
Water bodies and.
Yes. Schedule 11 is allocated to the natural character topic, which is in hearing stream 6, which I think is the last week before Christmas. Sorry. Got your birthdays and nearly Christmas. Apologies.
Thanks, buddy.
Sorry, I think that might be me who did the schedule. It's my bad.
I'm sharing that one.
Oh,
I don't care.
that's right. You get to hang out with cool people. Responding to Fire and Emergency New Zealand, any further evaluation or amendments for activity status, particularly wordings of matters of discretion to liaise with Mr. McGinty, and also liaise with him on firefighting water supply requirements, particularly their on-site.
Further question on that, it's probably a really stupid question, but if you do don't write this down yet, but
okay.
You might want to write this down, but I don't know yet. So it could be a stupid question, but if you do a subdivision, and if we use something like the orchards, for example, 150 units in there, and that has a detrimental effect on the water pressure in the town, is there something that in the rules that would say, well, actually you're doing this and you're going to have an effect on the water pressure for firefighting, therefore you have to upgrade the water pressure or do something, part of the financial contributions, because it's something beyond, it's well beyond just a normal thing. It's a major something, something like Greycow, for example. Yeah. It's a significant draw on council water pressure.
It depends on exactly what the financial contribution policy says. I'm not particularly across all of that, but that's where I imagine something like that would kick in.
Because the costs of councils could be quite astronomical.
The standard is a land use standard. It's not a subdivision standard.
Yes.
The way it's written, the first sentence is written as an appropriate standard. It's measurable.
Yes.
Second part of it involves a discretion as to whether it can meet an alternative solution under the standard. And I'm not sure that that's appropriate for a permitted activity.
Sure.
But that's very much a secondary issue. The first issue is more fundamental, was in terms of should this be a matter that the district plan captures. Mr. Can't think of his name, Mr. Allen, Mr. Gimsey think it should be. It shouldn't be left to the building act because it's a servicing matter, not a building code matter. They may be right, but what we need to understand is what the implications of that are in light of all townships. They're all struggling to meet it for FW3, let alone anything above that. And what's the implications of that in terms of a purported permitted activity regime for zones? Effectively, all of those permitted activities, they don't meet the code, will become a restricted discretionary activity.
Mr. Chair, do you want some cross-referencing with that to NZS 4404/2010, the subdivision and land development?
Yeah.
I have a feeling that there might be the link to the code within that, and then the engineering standards.
That would be useful. I knew there was something else that I was missing, so that that's it. That has a significant implication to what the wastewater connection restrictions have for Martinborough and Greytown. Is that it?
I believe so.
2 minutes to spare.
Nice.
Thank you all. Massive 3 days. Certainly more detail to get our teeth dug into in this one as opposed to the first hearing, which was at a higher level. I think the panels have enjoyed that more identifiable level of detail. So, thank you for your help. I'll get that minute out next week if we can. Up to that, thank you everyone. Again, thank you, Ruth, for your tireless efforts and rallying everybody.
And herding wildcats.
Yes. Have a closing carrot here. I invite you, Brianna, to listen that again.
Guess I lose my glasses on top of my
We
head.
do that.
We all stand.
Yeah.
Okay, whakamuitanga. Kia whakairia, te tapu, kia waitia, kia tūruki, whakataha ai, kia tūruki, whakataha ai. Haurie, huie.
Taekie.
The hearing is adjourned.
Young's